really good one for you today, guys. I put a lot of effort into this. I just want to make sure that my sound is all checking out on my channel. But today I want to talk about Nazis in comic books, right? Because although a lot of us, we watch comic books, we read comic books, we're all into the series, right? Comic books are overwhelmingly based on Nazis, on what we saw in World War II. And that's not by accident, right? Clearly, this really influenced everything that these early writers were doing. And I'm going to give you guys like the full Monty breakdown on explaining this mythology, this fascinating thing that's really happened here, right? And so let's start off here, right? So I want to go back and I want to look at some of the earliest mythologies, because I got a whole lineup here, but nothing is more significant than this one right here, right? One of my least personally favorite characters. Like, I've never been a Soup fan at all, but this guy's been around longer than anybody else. He's really the first, hero that we had of this kind. Like, he's the first one, and he was 100% a reaction to Nazis. Like, this guy was developed by two Jewish immigrants. These are Jews who were living in New York. And he comes out in 1939. So remember, all the stuff with the Nazis is already kind of starting to form by this time. This is before the start of World War II. But this is where, like, people who are opposing fascism, because this is what it is. And we're going to talk about, like, the fascism side of it, because that part is also kind of not dead, right? Like, we're seeing it, and it's repetitive in stories in a major way as well, right? We don't forget about the stories that we have about in modern stories about Nazis. So our modern stories are a lot tied into what clearly was a pivotal point in our history, right? And everyone who's writing these comics, everyone who's into this, they're not letting us forget what this meant and what to be looking out for. Okay, I'm just trying to go to my own channel and view my channel here. All right, I just want to make sure I'm good. Okay. So like I said, the first character that we really got into was Superman. This is 1937, but both the comic book companies would really get into it. Now, initially, the first thing I think about was Captain America, right? So let's move Soups out of here, right? Let's move Soups out of the one position here and put you out here so we can talk about Captain America. Now, obviously, Captain America, you can see here depicted fighting against some. He's quite literally punching Hitler in the face. So this tells you everything. But I'm not even going to start with that, because I talked about Superman being first, and that's just for DC, okay? So we switch over to Marvel, and we naturally think Captain America. But no, here's somebody who was fighting in Marvel, was fighting against the Nazis even before freaking Captain America, and this is Prince Namor. So this is all the way back. I think this is also 1939 that you have Namor and the original Human Torch, right? We're also heavily involved in fighting against the Nazis, right? So this is kind of the crazy part, is even before we got to Captain America, and we'll go through all Captain America's, timeline and contribution, because so much of what Captain America is spins off into everything we know about fighting against the Nazis. Like, his whole identity was based around that. But we also had, like I said, we had Prince Namor, and we've also got the original Human Torch, right? Which is shocking. The most shocking part is that this guy wasn't human at all, right? This is a Human Torch robot. So why they named him the Human Torch, I have no idea, okay? But he's out there with Namor, and he's fighting against the Nazis because that was their prime. So this is kind of where Marvel really gets a hold of its base. They start off right here. Anti-fascism at the highest level, right? So there's no denying it. So we're going to look at a couple of characters here, okay? I made a drink first because this is a lot of work. So one of the first characters we look at here is, oh man, he's not going to show, okay. Oh, there it is, the Red Skull, right? Oh, it's kind of scary when you're next to the Red Skull, right? Like, this guy's like creeping up on me, okay? Me and Red are hanging out. This is the OG sexy Red that I knew about as a kid, right? The Red Skull. And so, like, nobody epitomizes Nazi more than the Red Skull. Nobody ever in the history of the world. He was literally Hitler's right-hand man. And what he allows him to do is he represents fascism at the highest level, right? The Red Skull. And I think today is a good day to talk about fascism and what it actually looks like. And he also represents the occult obsession. And the occult obsession with the Nazis is going to be a huge, huge thing that I'm going to spin off in a couple other ways for you as well that we need to be aware of. And you know, I need to look and see if I've got this on deck, because there's another character as I'm sitting here thinking that I also know is very strong in coming from Nazi mythology. But you get the Red Skull, right? You get Captain America. So you're really strong right now. And they get a whole pantheon that comes out of, okay, this is Captain America and this is the fight that we have to have. So this is early on. This is their purest embodiment of anti-Nazism are these two characters. What the Red Skull represented was the purest Nazi. Captain America obviously represented the purest anti-fascist, period, right? And this is where he built his reputation on. And Captain America having to be frozen to come back was perfect because the Nazis never start. Like the Red Skull himself doesn't go away. I don't know if his formula makes him immortal, right? But clearly, you know, he was given long life as well. So that's why Captain America has to come back, because we know, and this is something important that they do say, right? Is that they've always kind of been on the myth that, you know, especially with Marvel, that fascism doesn't go away. You always have to be fighting against fascism. And Hellboy, man, they had some great characters in this. And I'm going to talk about Hellboy later, because Hellboy's story also figures into talking about Nazis, right? Like a lot of your favorite characters, at least a lot of my favorite characters, are born out of this fight against the Third Reich, essentially. And we see it in a lot of ways. And again, we're talking about movies and characters that are relatively popular right now. I mean, we're talking about Superman, who has never gone away, right? Essentially, Superman has never gone away. He's the first and he's the oldest. Captain America has never gone away, right? Wonder Woman has never gone away. So all these characters do add up to making the foundation of your comic book mythology, right? So Captain America, again, this is the super soldier formula. So this is anti-fascism on steroids. That's what he is all about, right? So Steve Rogers himself becomes this modern idealism. He is modern moral idealism with authoritarianism right now. So when we go and we watch his stories like the first Avenger, that's what you're seeing is this whole fight against authoritarianism. That's who Steve Rogers is. So of course, when you fast forward to the occult period, you know, to the time of the Civil War, Avengers Civil War, Marvel Civil War, they're already aligned, right? Like the sides are already drawn. There's no way that Steve Rogers can be part of any type of like registration systems or anything like that, because he's anti-fascism. He's anti-authoritarianism. Okay. Now, this will also be important because we have to remember in this scenario where Tony Stark is at, where Tony Stark comes from. This is very, very important to the story, because while Tony Stark, they're part of the group that develops the weapons to fight back against the Nazis, but in a lot of ways, they're not necessarily different than the Nazis themselves. So we see it in Stark because he quickly goes to, well, the government needs to have more control of everyone. Now, you would think that Steve Rogers would be the same, but he's not, because he was embedded with this idealism. So he and Tony, from the rip, all the way back to Tony Stark's pops, they all had a different view of what authoritarianism can look like, when authoritarianism is actually dangerous, right? So this is the foundation really for Marvel Comics, because I can tie this story into Captain America, we can tie it into Namor, right? We can tie it into the Human Torch. We can tie it into multiple ways of the foundations. Of course, on the Captain America wing, that's going to be everything with, Bucky story, the Winter Soldier. These are stories that we just got through telling the Winter Soldier story very recently, right? So there's always an opportunity to promote, the Nazis. They make a natural enemy. And of course, because of that, we get Hydra, right? Hydra is still operating right now. Hydra began as this Nazi occult division. And Nazi occultism is going to be prevalent in a lot of stuff. We're always going to talk about Nazi occultism, right? And this is where Hydra comes back. So they're Nazis. They're also with science. They're also with the occult. So they're bringing all the components. Let me see if I got this image for these guys here. You got all this like, oh yeah, man. When you're talking Baron von Strucker, you're talking about Zemo. You're talking about these cats here. These guys were giving up life and looks and everything to rep this Nazi life, right? They were 100% about it. And it's a lot further than this, right? And the reason why we stick to these guys like Zoloff, why it was naturally a fit, is because the Nazis actually were into eugenics already. They were literally into divine science. They were literally trying to develop, right, the optimal person. They thought that they had the ingredients to making, the perfect man. So this is what this is all about. And we need to throw Jesse Owens in this as a dude who really got back. So when we talk about, Zola, when we talk about Baron Zemo, Baron Zemo was great because he was an old school German aristocrat. So he really, really did show this desire that they were like it legitimately better. This is where this is where Zemo came from with. Let me see if I can grab an image of Baron Zemo here, right? Marvel Baron Zemo. Man, I cannot type. All right. It's not a good one here. Okay. This is a character I also kind of grew up with. Like, he was already, I wasn't understanding, the implications or what the whole like Nazi, movement meant, or what they were actually against. But you guys know this character. This character, Baron Zemo, has appeared a lot of times. It wasn't even in what we would call Nazi themed stories, but it was a very prevalent character. This has been one of Marvel's more consistent. Then Baron von Strucker, right? We're very familiar with him. And then, like, we get the whole, like, super soldier fallout, right? So the super soldier experiments, they get, you have obviously the Winter Soldier, Bucky, and he gets, captured, brainwashed, and used as a weapon, right? So this is all coming out. So, like, this is born out of, they're really trying to do this stuff. That's where all this stuff, this is why it's so important and why it filtered in the comic books, because they were really trying to do this, right? They were really working on making programmable soldiers. That's not an accident. That is not a fluke that they were on that whole thing, right? So I'm going to bring up this image right here because this is another great character that, again, these are very, very recent movies. We've had a lot of wars in the time that all this stuff has come out, right? But we've always gone back to, these are our mainstream. So even our modern characters, like Bucky, as you see him here, this, obviously he gets control, he gets taken by the Russians. So this is where the Russians start asserting themselves in it. And it's like, okay, why are you taking our soldiers, Russia? That's the first thing. Leave our soldiers alone, right? But no, that's not what they did. They went and they took over Bucky, and now they're mentally programming. And it took a lot. It took Wakanda, right? It was Wakanda who finally came in and deprogrammed him, deprogrammed the Winter Soldier. But this is what they were doing. So everybody was working on something, and this is how the Nazis, Nazis and the Russians all became, because the Russians were obviously newer enemies. As soon as, the Germans were quote unquote defeated, then it became the Russians. So we see this, and this is right in line. But again, this is another character that comes out of it that we need to be mindful of when we talk about how far-reaching Nazis in World War II have been influencing comic books for years, right? So let's go on. So I got a whole lot more for you guys here, right? And these are going to be a lot of your favorite characters, a lot of your favorite storylines, right? Maybe some of them are a little old, but we're going to pull a few of them together. What's this character here? The Weapon Plus program, right? The Weapon Plus program is another, like, let's create Okay, and so this is how deep it is, man. This is how deep the rabbit hole goes. Because now when we're talking about the Weapon Plus program, who do you think we get to bring into it now that we're talking about Weapon Plus, right? One of my favorites of all time, if I can get this image act right here, is Wolverine, right? So Wolverine literally was developed in part by reaction to the Nazis. Like the whole World War II era of comic book telling filtered into Weapon X as well. And like Wolverine's obviously a really old character. And this may even be a retcon story. I don't know if this was an initial story, an original story, but clearly you can see just how many characters that you're reading about right now that literally were influenced or originated because World War II, right? So we got a really, really good list here, right? We got a really, really good list of going on. And I'm going to tie another one because I've already shown you, we haven't even talked about DC. I just mentioned Superman. We haven't really talked DC and how DC figures into this whole talk about Nazis in modern mythology. I've really tried to just focus on Marvel. So we have a whole DC wing that's going to come up here in a moment. But I got another couple of characters I wanted to break out for you guys so you can see how big the scope of this is. And I'm sure it all makes sense, right? It all makes sense when you're seeing these characters together. And this is another one, another important character, right? So this is how the storylines get affected. And remember all the characters that bleed out of one character, right? Okay, let me pull up my boy here. Another one of my favorites. You know, maybe not a villain as much as the other guys. I don't know if he's necessarily a villain or if he was just fighting for his, right? But here he goes. Here, where you at? Okay. Okay. Magneto, right? Magneto's story is heavily tied into Nazis. Like, we see it. They don't talk about it, but he was on the other side of the Nazi experimentation, was Magneto. So, I mean, these are all characters that within the last, like, 10 years, we've had movies done, particularly showing this stuff. When we talk about Magneto, when they show his scene, right? Man, I forgot the guy who's torturing the Kevin Bacon character, Sebastian Shaw, right? Sebastian Shaw. They doesn't be like early on. It doesn't yeah, he's a Nazi. But what the hell do you think they were doing? Who do you think they were working for, right? Like this was all Nazi control stuff. So just that quickly, right, we got, Captain America, we got Namor, we got the original Human Torch, which never made any sense to me. We got the Winter Soldier, we got Wolverine, we got Magneto. That's not even including all the various villains that were tied into this story coming out of World War II. This is a huge, huge bulk of characters that were into this, right? And it goes deeper. I mean, we can go deeper. We got, here's another good one. This is like an example, because what the Nazis did is they opened up comic books of talking about fascism, right? And like faster state control, like how the state control could really get out of hand. And I'm going to show you this. Here, because this is another very modern way that it sneaks into it. And let me pull this one up here. Okay. All right. Sentinels, right? We know about the Sentinels, and the Sentinels, we obviously link to the X-Men, but it is a form of fascism. Let me enlarge this picture here. This is a form of fascism because this is state operated, right? So again, the branch offs that we get, this is kind of Nazi adjacent. So this isn't necessarily the Nazi myth itself coming to fruition. But if I were to look at it and say, okay, without World War II, without the talk of all the fascism, we would have never had even the Sentinels. Especially not this amazing Tri-Sentinel, right, that we see here. But some of your other like major villains, there's a few more. Baron Blood, Masterman, right? Masterman. Let me see if I can find this character, because that's a character I've never read about before. Let me see if I can find him, because this will be important, right? Masterman. Let's see. Ah, there he is. Okay, let's see. Yeah, man. Wow, wow. Like this is so brilliant, guys. This is so brilliant here to show you like how much of an influence that this storyline was having. In fact, I gotta get a couple of these. I'm gonna show you this. I'm gonna show you this one first, though. Right? Let me show you this. Where's that folder at here? Come on. Because this is crazy. I didn't even expect to see this when I looked it up. But then there's this character here, right? And of course, this is Master Man, right? Just like I talked about how heavily they are fighting against fascism. I got to put you up front and center. Let me pull my cam up and my logo up here so they can stay relevant. But this is Master Man. And you can see he's already beat everybody's ass, right? He's beaten everybody's ass here, right? So he's got Captain America. I think Namor's down there. I don't know who the rest of the dudes are, but it doesn't matter. And you could see this is real. This is as real as it gets, right? Allied swine. You've traveled 1,000 miles to die, only to die at the hand of Master Man. Now you can see, homie is clearly representing it to the fullest. His costume alone is letting you know exactly 100% what I'm all about. We really need Superman right here, right? We really could have used Superman. Let me clear some of these images out here because it's some great characters and some great thought-provoking storylines. It's nice to know where these stuff comes from and how influential it was. So I mean, like we've around Marvel, we've got a ton of like core characters that were linked into stories about the Nazis. Why do they keep doing this? Well, because this was the easiest and purest villains that you could have, and this wasn't like. This was also historically, this also coincides. Obviously, soldiers were at war, right? War was. I'm not gonna say war was great for comic books, right? Because that's a terrible thing to say. But comic book fit soldier lifestyle, right? Soldiers, okay, you're away from home. You're living off of like letters and sharing stories amongst each other, and then comic books. And the reason why, obviously pamphlets and stuff like that. Short stories were always great, but comic books were something like these guys were the first big audience of comic books. We're soldiers who were at war, U.S. soldiers particularly. It was easy for people to send this stuff to you. It was easy to get it out, easy for them to share. So this is kind of what we were seeing out of comic books at this time. It was also heavily like, let's make sure that we're staying on code with morale. So it was a comic books have always been, or at least started off as a very cultural and very motivational thing. Like whatever we were going through early on, they were really tied into our culture and just kind of making us continue to feel, as a country, especially during wartime. That's something that we really wanted to have. I'm sorry, I lost my logo here, so I want to make sure I get this back up on screen, right? So I want to know everybody know what I'm doing, when I'm doing it, and how I'm doing it. This is MythLabs, right? Okay, so I've done, I think, a reasonable job of kind of breaking out, all the Marvel characters that are born out of this, and that's not even it, right? I could literally stop right now and consider this kind of a successful session, right? But that leaves out DC's contribution to it as well, and DC is even more bedrock. This is the golden age of DC Comics. Nobody is more baked into this than DC at this time. And I'm going to show you, I'm going to highlight why. Now, I talked about, obviously, Superman being like the main dude before, even as they saw fascism kind of building up, this is where Superman gets created, right? And so that's kind of an easy one to talk about is Superman. But I'm gonna do you guys even better than this one, right? I'm going to do you guys better than this one because there's another character who was really created for fighting against Nazis, and it was, of course, Wonder Woman. Again, one of your pillar characters. If you're DC Comics, obviously Wonder Woman is a pillar that you're still building off of story. And I think like the second one, they've never shied away from that when they talk about Wonder Woman as a character. They never run away from her story. So even this anime, I think its animation is relatively new. I mean, like I say, less than 10 years old, right? So Wonder Woman's initial story, you see in the movie, her foundational story starts off with we're fighting against the Nazis in World War II. Like the guy that's in the movie, can't remember what his name is, but that's what the whole storyline's about. He's a pilot who crash lands on this island. On Themyscira. And they got to decide, she falls in love with him. So there's all that. So the golden era of DC Comics also starts off with World War II. Everything is baked. And not only is it Wonder Woman, right? Her early stories were all about the Nazis, Axis power. Her philosophy was truth, love, consent. And that's a direct rejection of fascism. So at her core, what Diana is born with or trained with her entire life being in Themyscira is consent, right? People being able to make their own choices and being free. So there's no way. Now, you know, we saw that the rest of the Amazonians, they didn't get involved in it at all. They're like, whatever. But that wasn't how Diana rolled. So it was impossible for her as a character. And again, she's created by these gods to be virtuous. That is really what Diana is. Like, that's, to me, this is really what makes her special, is her virtues, right? That she does, like, out of everyone, she doesn't waver at all, right? Diana is probably one of the most consistent characters. I know they kind of write her, like, even with the whole thing, when they did Injustice, when they did the Injustice series, right? And I got the Injustice series, and you know, I felt like as a story, it was really a disservice to Superman. The legacy of Superman. It really was, right? Because that's not who he's supposed to be ever, right? And I don't think it was clever that they did it. I mean, I thought it was kind of cool. I enjoy the game. I play the game all the time. I love it. Evil Superman is the scariest thing ever, right? But he shouldn't have done that. It really does. The imagery changes Superman forever. This long history that I remember, man. We getting close to 100 years of Superman. We're getting really close. He's 1937. We're 2025, 2026 right now. So we're getting in, you know, pretty soon we're going to hit the 90th anniversary of Superman. That, nobody's beating that. I don't think there's a created character that has outlived or outlasted Superman, right? Everyone's come after him. And again, he's not one of my favorite characters, but I got to respect what he does. And here's the thing, Superman fans. He doesn't beat everybody in a fight. I know you guys always want to believe that, but he doesn't. But let's get back to what our actual topic is. And our actual topic is World War II. And now we see how Diana is... Oh, my point was originally was that the Injustice series, she also was complicit with Superman in the fact that she was his partner and his loudest driver. That conflicted with her core moral training. Okay? Now, for Superman was one person who got hurt by... you know, his own love. Like, he was deeply wounded. Like, what the Joker did to him was such a wound that I'm like, yeah, I could see him breaking over that. That does not explain Diana, because at her core, she would have been against any type of totalitarian control, which is exactly what he did. When Supes took over, it was more of an authoritarian. Like, it wasn't more of an authoritarian. It was 100% an authoritarian regime now under Superman that Wonder Woman is now backing up. And again, if you got those two people there, those two entities, that's it. It doesn't matter what anybody else does, right? Really, really doesn't matter. So I don't feel like they could have compromised Wonder Woman enough to be that character, given what her entire role was, okay, in this. And then that brings us, of course, to the Justice Society, right? And the Justice Society is literally the original superhero team. And what did the original superhero team do? They were fighting in World War II. The first superhero team in all comic bookdom was all about World War II. And that's your original, that's your Flash, that's the original Hawkman, right? Like, these are the characters that are in there, like legitimate standing characters, heavily tied to World War II wartime nationalism and also propaganda, right? There's a reason, like, Wonder Woman didn't have a reason to wear a Stars and Stripes costume when she ain't even from America, right? I don't know if you guys ever looked at that or thought about that, but why is Wonder Woman almost walking around in an American flag? Because she was on our side and we were fighting against Nazis. So all this really starts to come together, and you can see this massive, massive impact that genre, that era of time, had on all our writing right now, and it's filtering through all these characters, right? So I'm gonna halt it right here. 30 minutes is really about all I can do. Just yak. Even though I'm up on my soapbox and I'm yakking, you know, every now and then you get a little break. So I got a lot of material. So I'm gonna convert this into a part 2. But we got really 30 good minutes of talking about Nazis and comic books. I've gone through the entire DC alignment, how DC, you know, how Marvel first really was engineered around their core characters were around these World War II threats, and now to the DC part. But I still have a lot to go. We barely scratched the surface. This has turned out to be a much longer talkative presentation than I thought. So again, I will be back. I appreciate you guys stopping in. I'll probably be back about this time, give you guys another 30-ish minutes based on the topic that I already got laid out for you. It's a lot, so if you enjoy it, hit that like and subscribe. I'm going to say what's up to the TikTok.